Welcome, everybody, to the Reincarnation Book Club, especially to have Chris Bache here. We're just so honored to have you join us. And just to give you a little bit of background about Chris, he's Professor Emeritus from Youngstown State University. He's a fellow at IARS, Institute of Noetic Sciences, which there's several people who are ionic people here. A adjunct faculty member at CIIS, which is the California Institute of Integral Studies. He is an advisor for the Grof Transpersonal Training and the Grof Foundation, and author of, is it 3 or 4 books?
4 books.
4, yeah. On your cover it said 3, but I was pretty sure there was another book in there. And like I said, he was at our reincarnation symposium. And then today I got to watch him on Heather Ainsworth's podcast. So that link to that interview is in the chat. And tonight, what I asked Chris to do was to focus on the chapter 4, which is about the Oversoul. First, I want to start with a quote that is in that chapter, and it's my favorite quote out of the whole book. It is, "Reincarnation gives us reason to ask larger questions about what we begin to appreciate, the true scope of our lives. We can no longer see ourselves as simply the citizens of one country or one century. We must instead come to understand ourselves as time travelers with unrestricted passports." I love that quote. Oh my gosh. It's so apropos for this group. So let's begin, Chris, first of all, by talking about what is the Oversoul?
Yeah. Well, when I was writing Lifecycles, I called it the Oversoul to differentiate it from the more common understanding of soul in the Western religious traditions as being the consciousness that holds our individual existence in this present life. But after I wrote the book and after I kind of defined the Oversoul, which I'll get to in just a minute, at the end of the chapter and at the end of the book, it just seemed more natural for me to call this entity that holds all of our life experiences, all of our incarnational experiences, and all of our experiences in between our lives, the soul with a capital S, and just redefining it as we go. So the soul is just that. It is the consciousness that holds all of our experience, former life experiences, life between life experiences. It is the aggregate. It is our larger identity. It's our truer identity. And so just as our individual identity may have certain fragmentation or certain unintegrated aspects, the Oversoul at some different stages of its life may also have unintegrated aspects of its many lifetimes, of its many adventures. But I think we are moving into a time of history where we're witnessing a shift take place in the Oversoul. I think we're witnessing a rising of more and more of our past life identities into our conscious awareness. And when those past life experiences surface, they bring with them their unfinished business. And so usually the first thing that happens when we begin to encounter some of our past lives, we usually are working within a therapeutic context. So the first thing that has to happen is they bring us their unfinished business, and we must help them heal their unfinished business. So a lot of the early contact is around healing the former life aspects that need healing. But as this continues, as more and more of our former lives are healed, they begin to be more integrated into in a chorus, in the chorus or the orchestra or the symphony that the soul is. And so it becomes not simply a matter of healing past life fragments, but it becomes a matter of marshaling the extraordinary talents which have been collected over these thousands and thousands of years, and integrating the extraordinary insights and wisdom which has been collected over all this time. So to me, the Oversoul is the consciousness that holds all of our work, all of our ideas, all of our experiences. And I think most of us, when we die, if all goes well and that we don't get sidetracked, when we die, we return to the consciousness of the soul. And when we incarnate, we contract into individual egoic consciousness. When we die, we return to soul consciousness, and we incarnate, we shrink. And of course, not all of the soul, not all of the oversoul incarnates in any one incarnation. Michael Newton, in his book Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls, he says he thinks maybe about 5%, if I think I have this right, about 5% of our soul's energy incarnates. Because if we incarnated all of our soul's energy in one incarnation, he said it would blow our circuits, it would short circuit, because there's so much power in the soul's energy. So that'll be a good starting point.
That's very well said. And one of the things that you wrote about when you were going into defining Oversoul, the analogy, you're great with analogies in all your books, but this one I particularly love, the analogy of the Nautilus. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. In fact, hold on one second. I love the images of a chambered nautilus. Now, isn't that just a beautiful image of the soul? That each one of these lives over infinite amount of time, very specifically, very precisely, leads to another life, leads to another life, leads to another life, while the total soul gets larger and larger incrementally. Now, I want to step back and say, it's not, this makes it look linear, that one life A leads to life B, leads to life C. And of course, we know that it's not quite that way. That I think of it's like our lives are like a deck of cards. We may have 52 cards, but in any one lifetime, we don't play all 52. We play only a limited number of cards that are dealt, that the soul selects and chooses to define the themes and the challenges of any one incarnation. So that it's not that the life I had in the 19th century is the dominant life feeding into my present 20th century life. The dominant life for this century may come from the 18th or 16th or 14th century. So it's a much more complex relationship than simply a linear progression. But overall, there's a developmental sequence that just spirals out and reaches through time into larger and larger developmental patterns.
What a beautiful, I presume that's a fossil.
Yes. Yeah.
That is absolutely stunning. I lived in Florida for most of my life, and so anytime we found a nautilus, it was just so precious. So that might be one of the reasons why I resonated so much with that analogy.
Yeah.
Then I love what you said about the Oversoul being our bridge. You say our Oversoul is our bridge into the cosmos, the intermediate spiritual beings who direct and orchestrate the higher functions of the whole.
Yeah.
Please talk more about that. That is something that is just intriguing me so much.
Yeah. Well, the way I understand it is the spiritual reality is filled with many layers of beings. And there are kind of lower levels closer to the earth. You might think of as lower levels of the bardo. And there are intermediate levels and there are higher levels. But there are lots of levels. But of course, all of the levels emerge from the universal oneness of the energy that manifests itself as the universe. So our time-space identity, our present identity, as magnificent as it is, it's just small. I mean, it's 100-year identity at best. But the soul is 100,000-year identity. And the universe is multi-billion year identity. And the consciousness that's manifesting the universe is even older and larger still. So I think that the oversoul or the soul is the intermediate, is a much more capable consciousness for mediating this contact with deeper levels of reality, with mediating contact with the consciousness that is the species mind. I mean, not just a collective unconscious in the form of a passive receptacle, but I think that truly there is a consciousness which husbands and organizes the unconscious experience of our entire species. And every species has an integrative consciousness. And beyond that, we have Earth consciousness. And beyond that, we have a solar system consciousness. We go into archetypal reality, vast, vast dimensions of beings who just live on a completely different order of time and scale of time. Like our galaxy, our solar system is a very small system. As big as it is, it's very small. But the archetypes are like the galaxies. They're vast and huge, and they just dwarf our solar system. And so if we are going to engage in any way some of the archetypal patterns of creation, or if we are going to engage the deeper angelic forms or the creative intelligence of our universe, the soul is much more able to mediate those types of communications, communions, than our poor, time-space identity, unless some people have gone through extraordinary development of their time-space identity. And I think they actually have begun to embody their soul identity in their incarnate experience. Yeah.
That brings up a really good point. Now, I know you have meditated, you've done regression work, and you've also done the psychedelics.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about those modalities to help you bridge to the oversoul and as a jumping off point
Yeah.
to the cosmos.
Well, I wrote Lifecycles after I had been at YSU. When I started my career at YSU in 78, and I read Ian Stevenson, and Ian Stevenson convinced me that reincarnation was a natural fact of life. And nowhere in my studies in graduate school had that been taken seriously. So I had to erase the blackboard of everything I learned in graduate school and start from scratch. And so I read the past life literature, and I read more the spiritual literature around reincarnation. And I wrote Lifecycles about 8 or 9 years after that. And then it took a couple of more years for it to be published. But at that time, I was still thinking very much in reincarnation in terms of the story of the soul's evolution, that each one of us is part of a soul lineage. And the story of the soul's lineage is these challenging itself with specific tests, specific circumstances, karmic scripts, and growing and developing itself incrementally bit by bit. And so the story that I told there is classically the kind of Eastern story that we grow, we heal our mistakes, we overcome our mistakes, we make more challenges, we grow slowly, incrementally, we become more compassionate, more intelligent, we harness the abilities that are innate within our makeup, which we didn't give ourselves this magnificent body. It was given to us by the creative intelligence of the universe or by the divine. But it was basically kind of culminated in spiritual awakening classically, in something like enlightenment or something like moksha, awakening, deliverance. And I didn't take it much farther than that. I was really interested in trying to sort of ask the question, okay, if reincarnation is true, so what? What is it? What are the implications for our identity? And we've been talking about that in the soul. What are the implications for how we understand our children? What are the implications for Christianity? Since most of my students were coming out of a Christian background, the longest chapter in the book is the chapter on Christianity and reincarnation. Is it compatible? Is it not compatible? And so I dive into that. But I really didn't go much farther in that. And I had done about 3 years of past life therapy because I did my psychedelic work for 4 years. I stopped for 6 years and then I resumed it for 10 years. And in that 6 year period, I did some past life therapy, and it was that time that I wrote Lifecycles. But when I resumed my work, my psychedelic work, and went deeper in that process, new vistas began to open to me. And I began to have a deeper experience of many things, but among them, reincarnation. At a good years later into this process, I had the experience, for example, and by this time, I had been initiated into levels of spiritual reality, which we might call subtle level reality. To me, it's like psychic spiritual reality, subtle level reality, causal level reality. And then at the top, for me, diamond luminosity. Subtle level reality are the kind of the steel girders. They're the deeper constitutional structures that hold the whole thing together. It's like the girders in a skyscraper. The individual rooms fit and hang within the girder structure. And I was having a lot of experiences of the human species as a single organism, that all of our individual lives were nodal points within this massive organism, and our minds were fractal sparks within its massive mind. And of course, behind that, of course, are deeper levels of the divine mind. But just kind of taking it that one step out. And I had experiences where I was shown that our individual diseases are part of the whole body of humanity learning how to be healthy in new and challenging situations. So the diseases that we had were not simply private, part of our private karma, but they were part of a collective karma that we inherited. And how we wrestle with these diseases and heal them contributes not only to our individual well-being, but to the well-being of the species as a whole. So just as for an individual, we have the outer layer of the individual, but inside we have the soul, which gathers all the learning of the outer layer. So the outer layer pops and returns to the soul, but the soul is the intelligence that's gathering and integrating all. I had experiences that showed me that the same thing is true for the human species, that the human species is composed of all our individual incarnations, but there is a soul to humanity, a collective psyche, which is integrating all of our experiences constantly. So I had experiences of experiencing the entire species integrating with the pulse of reincarnation. So I was in a radically expanded time frame, and in the time that it takes a wave to break onto the beach and go back into the ocean, I experienced a whole generation of precious human beings incarnate, live their life, and then return to the ground of being. Incarnate and live their life in the ground of being. So it was both a devastating and an extraordinary numinous experience to experience the larger intelligence that is specific to our planet, that's specific to our developmental process, in which all of us were small parts, important parts. Didn't trivialize the importance of individuals, but it gave me the larger context. So I began to understand that reincarnation is not simply about the story of individual soul development. It is that's true, but it's also about our species development, the spiritual development of humanity. And just as this individual soul gathers the learning of individual incarnations, and then when it gives birth to another incarnation, it gives birth to it in a more advanced form. Likewise, for the species as a whole, this intelligence was gathering all of our learning from 8 billion people, 9 billion people, and integrating into its this massive store of knowledge and giving birth to another generation of itself. So that expansion of horizon, and then maybe I should stop there. There's other things I would add, but that's probably a lot for right now. So I can just stop there and pause for a bit.
That is a lot, and what I marvel with you is your gift with words to help define that experience into words that we humans can understand. And, just even hearing the concept of tapping into the species, I could feel it
Mhm.
as you were talking about it, and I'm sure others could as well.
Mhm. Well, as we all were, as we all are, I was designed to do the work that I did. And we're all designed to fulfill a specific role in the evolution of our human family. And so I guess the gift of gab came in with the passion to explore the world with psychedelics.
And
But
this is why we do what we do. You talk about we must use consciousness to explore consciousness.
yeah,
And even though, you do meditate, you have done regressions, you've done the psychedelics, this is another way to use consciousness by having group consciousness come
yeah,
together and explore these thoughts.
it sure is.
I,
And I
and
want to tell
that's,
you, to
go ahead.
me, I hope you're all of you are maybe nourished by what I'm saying, but I want you to know that I'm nourished by being able to talk about these things with you, because I don't get to have these very conversations that often. So it nourishes me to have these conversations with you. Yeah.
Yes, we so feel that. And can you talk a little bit about your experience with Dr. David Kleinis?
David Clanus. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that
Um,
was very fascinating how he
yeah.
helped you expand your consciousness.
Yeah. He was the chair of the counseling department and during some of my years at YSU. And he taught a course, and essentially he called it deep relaxation, and but it basically was a course in reincarnation and soul retrieval. And so I sat in on and took one of his seminars, and then I did 3 years of private work with him. And one of the things that made David's work unusual at the time is that he didn't, some past life therapists kind of think of former lives like a tape, a fixed story because they're dead. And you kind of start the tape and you can stop it anywhere and then you can restart it. But it's like you're learning from the tape of that being's life, the stable memory of that life. But David, his work was different. He basically he understood former lives as still living entities, living to varying degrees of wholeness, to varying degrees of fragmentation, to varying degrees of peace and harmony or unhappiness. And when you encounter them whole being to whole being. So you invite them to tell you their story, to show you their story. And they have to tell you their story because their burdens have been transferred to you. You're responsible for working with them. And so they have to sort of open up and let you into their life. And it's a dynamic back and forth relationship. You have conversations with them. You can explain how things are different now. You can broaden their horizons, because sometimes they're trapped in pain, which is defined by the historical circumstances in which they lived. And it's very liberating for them to know that history has gone on, and things which were the way they were when they were alive, it's not the way they are now. It's very different. And when they show you their pain, by working with it, by bringing it in and working with it, and working with your own higher self, and working with the angelic helpers, you can help bring that incomplete life to a state of completion, to a state of fruition. And when this happens, you liberate that shadowed soul fragment and send it back to the light. And just like happens ideally when they die, but in this case, there was something holding them back, that not allowing them to get all the way back to the light of their soul. Later, in subsequent sessions, they sometimes show up in your work again as messengers. But when they do, they come back completely differently. They come back radiant. They come back filled with light. And what I really appreciated about David's work was this was a living consciousness encountering a living consciousness in dialogue, which was fruitful for both parties. And that I thought was very helpful. Mm-hmm. And so with David, I uncovered about 12 or so former lives. No one important, like most of our former lives, and no, they're not historically important persons. They're just mostly peasants and ordinary common people. Yeah.
Very fascinating. I love your whole description about your work with him in that chapter. And something you said in that chapter is something I say in my groups all the time about we don't ask the universe enough. And you made the comment about the Oversoul can only really begin to help us if we ask for assistance.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Well, it seems to be one of the sort of universal laws, which is designed to put the burden of responsibility where it belongs. And where it belongs is on the present incarnation. So the present incarnation has free will, relative free will, but it has free will. And it doesn't want to turn over responsibility for its decisions to a higher authority, because then what's the point of being you in your incarnation? So you have to ask for help. You have to ask for guidance. You have to ask for forgiveness. You have to ask for help from higher beings before those beings kind of have the authority to help you, to step in and help you. And that seems to be something really fundamental about the way higher levels of spiritual reality are allowed to interact with lower levels of spirituality or human physical incarnations. Yeah.
Thank you for reiterating that. I think that's such a powerful dynamic, and it goes to what you were talking about earlier, that the Oversoul is our connection with the cosmos. So it makes sense that we interact with it. It's not here lording it over us, is it?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to hog the questions. I want to open the floor to anyone who has a question. I have a couple more, but I want to see if we have any other questions. Just raise your hand and we'll find you. Open the mic. Let's see.
I live for questions.
Yeah.
In a group, if I give a talk is just an excuse to get to the question and answer, because that's where the juice really lies. Yeah.
All right. So John Koenig has a question. Let me find you and pin you, John. Where are you?
Hi, John.
Hey there. I'm loving your work, by the way. A simple question, actually two questions. Do I have one oversoul? Do all of us have one oversoul? Or do we have a bunch of oversouls that have a bigger oversoul? And the other question is the relationship of time. You refer to former lives. If time is an illusion, how does that part work?
Yeah. Well, I may be wrong on this, but I tend to think that we have one oversoul. There is one soul. Now, there might be an oversoul, but then we're dealing with a consciousness like the species soul, which is made up of many individual oversouls. But for us individually, I think we have one overarching, embracing intelligence, consciousness. Time, now that's a really interesting topic, isn't it? There are some authors who have encouraged us to think that the way that we shouldn't really be thinking in terms of reincarnation. We should be thinking in terms of multi-incarnation, that all of our lives are taking place simultaneously. And it's not a linear cause and effect. It's a much more subtle cause and effect between all these lives that are taking place at the same time. And I've tried to think like that. I've tried to put myself in the world and try to imagine how, since I believe that the whole system is set up for us to grow, to become more than we were before. It's hard for me to imagine and comprehend how that growth can take place in a multi-incarnational theory. You must have to develop some type of Boolean logic or some different non-traditional kind of logic to imagine how that multi-causality could be functioning. So in general, I basically have not opted for a multi-incarnation. I've opted for a linear incarnation with a couple of provisos. First of all, an historically, let's put it, a sequence of incarnations do not have to occur necessarily in an historical order. Robert Monroe says, and his Monroe's book, The Far Journeys and The Ultimate Journey in the Monroe Institute of Applied Science, he says it's like a circle. Time is getting on a circle, and eventually you develop far enough in your evolutionary story that you realize that you can incarnate in any historical period you want. So you don't go necessarily 17th to 18th to 19th to 20th century. You could jump from the 16th century to the 21st century back to the 4000 BC. You can move around historical sequence, but to your development, there is still a linear sequence, but it's not in historical order. So that's one provision. And I'd make another provision. We usually draw a contrast between time, linear time, and non-time, eternity, which is radically beyond all time whatsoever. And that's what people often, I'm guessing, John, that's the vision that you're referring to when we think of time being an illusion, because when you're in eternity, you know that eternity is more real than linear time, and therefore it has an illusory quality. But in between linear time and eternity or non-time, I think there are many modalities of time. One of the things that happened in my psychedelic work is that I was initiated into different modalities of time that I eventually came to call deep time. I had a series of experiences for 1 year in which I was taken back into the same landscape. And in this landscape, I was all my time moments of my life, beginning to end, experienced simultaneously right now. It was like my entire life, instead of being like this, it was turned on end, and I was looking at it through a paper towel roll, and all of my time moments were compressed, and what stood out were the major themes of my life, not the time moments of my life. Later, I was taken into layers of deep time that transcended my individual history, that went into the story of humanity, until eventually, at the very end of my journey, in the 70th session, when I was taken into the most radical state of deep time that I had ever been taken into. And I went through a horrendous strip down in order to be taken into this condition. I was somewhere, I would guess, maybe 100,000 years into the future. but I was in time. I was still within time, but in different modalities of time. And so all of these modalities of deep time are before we step out of time altogether into eternity or timelessness. So, those are kind of my provisos. So I think linear time actually serves us well. I mean, there's a real advantage, just like linear time breaks up all time into bite-sized pieces. And an incarnation breaks up infinite possibilities into bite-sized lifetimes. And being small allows us to do concentrated work, which is very helpful for our long-term development. Yeah.
Quick finally, the Oversoul itself exists in time?
It depends, I think, on it exists at least in deep time, but not necessarily in linear time as we know it. And I think it partly depends on how developed the soul is, how far has transcended the limits of space and time. Again, Robert Monroe, in his description of the Bardo reality, it's a beautiful description, and is in Far Journeys and in The Ultimate Journey, he has a real sense of the gradual unfolding, the gradual opening to time that takes place in the Bardo. And I think we find the same thing in Michael Newton's work, Journeys of the Soul and the Destiny of Souls. A sense that the Bardo is huge with many, many thousands of layers, a gradual opening to larger and larger horizons of time. Yeah. And I was really delighted when I was at a meeting and I heard Bernard Carr from London and part of Science and Medical Network. And he has developed a proposal in physics that was the first time I heard a physicist describe different dimensions of reality conceptualized and having different temporal dimensions. It was the first time I heard a physicist describing a physical model that made room for the kind of experiences of alternate times or multiple modalities of times that I had experienced in psychedelic studies and spaces. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, John. Yeah.
Thanks for your question, John. And Kim, you have the next question.
Oh, I put my hand back down because it was covered in
okay. I did not see that. All right. And so I'll remove the pen. And now we have Dan Drazen. Welcome. And what is your question?
Thanks. It's Drazen, and thank you, Chris, for everything.
Hi, Dan.
I'm totally intrigued with the question of time, and it seems to me that the best we can do is the best we can do in trying to shoehorn infinity into language.
Yeah.
And so, looking for ultimate answers always seems to me to break down to, what's satisfying to me, what will make sense to me, and that ultimate answer. But within that, I agree with everything that you're saying. You can't stuff 1,000 pounds of language into a 5-pound bag of reality into a 5-pound bag of language.
But it sure is fun to try, isn't it?
It is. It's wonderful. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Dan.
Anyone else have a question online?
Kim's got one again.
That made me think of something else.
Okay.
I don't know. So what I was thinking when I was reading about, time and Robert Monroe's view that you were citing in that chapter, but I'm wondering, part of our difficulty in conceptualizing this is, as you said, we don't have the language. I mean, if you know of any languages that, do have more of a conception of that, where there are, I'm thinking probably more what we would call ancient history, where they were more in touch with shamanic ideas and that kind of thing. Are there languages where it comes closer to being able to have a discussion about time other than linear?
That's a good question. And I think you're right. Your instinct that we would want to look at indigenous cultures and see how they conceptualize time in their maybe a more nuanced multimodal language. Now, I haven't come across, and I'm not an anthropologist, so I don't read extensively in this area. So my opinion means nothing here. But I just haven't personally come across cultural systems, indigenous cultures that truly have a metaphysically nuanced understanding or concept of multimodal time. The closest I've seen is in how they talk about the ancestors and the realms that the ancestors occupy. But I think that's just the tip of the iceberg, just the tip of the iceberg. To me, psychedelic experiences, I mean, of course, many indigenous cultures have incorporated psychedelic experiences for thousands of years. And I think that gives them a certain edge in discussing and looking at multimodalities of time. But the psychedelics that we have at our disposal now are much more powerful than those classically used in indigenous cultures, psilocybin or ayahuasca or peyote. Now we have a really hyper powerful systems, and we also have modes of intensifying those experiences because we have the whole world's library of music, which we can bring into a psychedelic session, amplifying the effect of our psychedelics, which is much more intense than sitting around a campfire and listening to someone chanting, as beautiful as that is. And I'm not suggesting it isn't, but we can open up much more radically. And that gives us, I think, a deeper access into the mystery of time. So I would expect over the next 50 or 100 years, we're going to find a much richer, more evocative way of speaking about time and integrating time with our physics, because our psychedelic experiences will continue to evolve and continue to emerge. So for me, with you, Kim, it's an open question.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And can I add to that her question also, what about the Vedic traditions, the Buddhist traditions, the Taoist traditions? Many feel that those languages are sacred. And so I wonder if there's words in there that more closely define what you're talking about.
Again, I'm not enough of a linguistic scholar to really answer that question. So I would have my knowledge of those systems is based upon translations, and some of the translations may have lost some of the nuances of their earlier language. But as I have taken in their systems to the extent that I've been able to, and I'm not a specialist in these, but I've been a generalist working within them for all my academic life. The closest I sort of see to something that approximates the multimodalities of temporal existence comes in some of their discussions of the gods. But even there, the gods so often appear to be almost like human experience writ large, not sufficiently differentiated from human experience to really represent the kind of novelty of concepts that I think these questions are reaching for. Yeah, but I might be wrong. We'd have to bring in a Hindu specialist, a Taoist specialist, and see what they would say about that.
I hope we can do that at some point in time. That's a dream of mine.
Yeah.
And Kathy has a question.
And then Tom.
Oh, and
Thank
Tom?
When you were speaking about the concept of time and oversoul and whatever, my question comes in. It's my personal experience that we inhabit a multi-dimensional soul in our current incarnation.
Mm-hmm.
We have multiple experiences, and multiple parts of our souls are elsewhere in other dimensions and other experiences concurrently with what we're experiencing now. So I wondered how, and I guess thinking further on that, I had this vision in a dream once about how this was all set up. And it's resonating with me at this point that these multidimensional experiences are just one aspect of this life, and that this occurs with every incarnation. So it's so broad, more broad than we realize, perhaps. How does that resonate with you?
That makes sense to me. I mean, if we just imagine if we have 5 to 10 lives from different periods of history, and some of them may be future centuries, not just past centuries, and these lives are psychically alive within our psyche, and they are carrying time experiences that are not simply our time experiences. So if we open to them, it would be like opening up into multiple layers of time simultaneously. And again, some of these beings may have incarnations on other dimensional systems. They may be in other star systems, so that the breadth is not restricted to just a planet Earth. It may be even wider than our solar system. So that gives us a certain cosmological quality with respect to time, as well as other aspects. Yeah,
Well,
that makes sense to me.
I'm not sure if I'm communicating well enough what I'm thinking.
Okay.
It's just this life that I'm existing in this moment. There are multiple pieces of this same soul experiencing life simultaneously at this time, at this moment. Mm-hmm. And then from there, every experience, reincarnation that may have been had, it's the same thing. You're not experiencing just this one life, this one soul. It's fragments of your soul are experiencing in a multidimensional way at this moment. So I guess I'm not sure if I'm communicating what I'm wanting to at the moment, but
well, it sounds like what you're envisioning is kind of not a reincarnational system, but a multi-incarnational system. And there are thinkers who support you completely. They think that's the better way to go. I haven't been able to succeed in being able to think coherently within that system. Yeah. So, and I just haven't been able to do it. That doesn't mean it's not real, And so, if your intuition's gone there, you have good company to think like that. Yeah.
Kathy, have you had experiences with that? And if so, how did they come about?
Yes. I've spoken of the Egyptian mystery schools, the content I've taken, and you do a multidimensional journey. And when you do this and you cross into this multidimensional journey, you feel and see other aspects of this current soul, and you can actually call back all those pieces to you for what to establish more coherent in that journey, and learn and assimilate some of the experiences that those parts of your soul are experiencing, other planets, other dimensions, other realms, if you will, that sort of thing. And as I do have an affinity for Egypt. I hope to go there one day and see what happens. And that came from an extremely young age, about age 3, 4, anyway. So I don't know how many of you have maybe participated in something like that or done this journey that is a process you go through. And um, what you experience in that journey. But again, it's really fascinating to call those pieces of yourself back to the original soul, see what they have to contribute at that moment. And I'll gather they're gathering from me and the other parts of my soul at the same time I'm doing it with my part. So anyway, and how it's a maybe a broader sometimes I think we tend to put it in this little box right here when it's really so much more.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Kathy.
Oh, good. Chris, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Tom.
And always, whenever I hear you, as you know, I've listened to many of your guest speeches on podcasts and so forth, and I'm always very appreciative of what you have to offer. I think it's a great thing when true scholars like yourself go ahead and take acid trips and really get wisdom that most scholars don't have.
And likewise, Tom, I have kept and cherished the material that you sent me from your own experiences.
Oh, thank you. Mm-hmm. In answer to what, in reference to what Kathy was just talking about, 20 years ago, did a significant study. It came up with myself when I was informed through a group that I was doing weekly channelings with for almost 20 years. That some of us, myself included, have our souls are not a one entity. They're actually a committee of different souls that have come together for this lifetime only. And then when this lifetime is over, they'll go their separate ways and so forth. So what it gives you is another aspect of multidimensionality. Yeah. And your life is a crossroads for the past lives of all these other lifetimes of the various different souls. It's a very interesting concept. Most people that I have had a chance to talk to about it didn't want to hear about it because it made things too complicated for them. The
concept of an aggregate soul.
Yeah, and one thing that's wonderful about it is that it does it helps deflate the ego a lot, because the ego turns out to be it shows you that the ego is really a fiction, more than anything else. Yeah. But I wanted to say too that one of the issues with language, and one of your great gifts, Chris, to my way of thinking, is your facility with language and finding ways to describe these things. But one of the primary issues and stumbling blocks we have is that all these things that we're talking about are things in the infinite world. Yeah. And we are finite. Our minds are finite. Our language is even more finite. Yeah. And so it's impossible to define something infinite with something that's finite. Yeah. And even to adequately describe it, all we can do is point at the moon and experience it as best we can, which I think your work is a wonderful example of what a rich pursuit that can be. So thank you again.
You bet. And yet, even though we may fail, it's a glorious undertaking to push it as far as we can and to expand our understanding as much as we can through the skillful use of language, even if we have to fall into silence at the end.
Well, I totally agree. I didn't you started psychedelics early. I didn't start till I was 75, and I've still got a lot of acid trips in front of me, I hope. I'm trying to do them in other countries so they're legal, though,
Yeah, you want to keep it. You want to be lawful. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. And now we have Smita.
Hi, Chris.
Hi,
great
Smita.
to see you again.
Good to see you.
Yeah. My question had to do more with the Oversoul as it connects to our earthly incarnations. Would you say that, or what would you say about, the Oversoul? Does it encompass all our earthly incarnations or beyond the earthly incarnations or aspects beyond our earthly existence also? Could you throw some light on that?
Well, I'm going to roll the dice and gamble here, okay? Because who knows? I mean, really, I used to tell my students all the time, when you die, you are confronting infinite knowledge. And so you have the opportunity to have any question you want answered. And so you want to have good questions. And I call these questions for Jesus. And so this is a question for Jesus. I mean, what are the parameters of the Oversoul? But basically, I mean, sort of logically, as we think this through, and as I look at the wide range of people's experiences, I tend to think of the Oversoul, or as I would simply put, the soul with a capital S, and the soul with the small s would be Chris Bache's psychic, entity. But soul with a capital S is the Oversoul, and the Oversoul would include not only my experiences on planet Earth and in the Bardo, but it would, if I had experiences before I took up my physical incarnations on Earth, it would include those as well. And so I tend to think of the soul as the aggregate of all of the experiences of this individual soul stream, where as far as it goes. I don't see any reason for restricting it in any smaller way. Now, it may be the case that for all intents and purposes, most of the oversouls that we would gather in this room might be filled with earthly lives. But I bet there'd be some that would have some soul aspects that would be beyond our earthly lives.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Smita.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now, Chris, I know you're involved with the Grof Foundation, and back in the day when LSD became illegal and Stanislav Grof developed holotropic breath work, I was wondering if you have been involved with that at all.
Well, I've done some holotropic breathwork sessions with Stan, and I've been invited sometime in 2027, I think, to do a module in the Grof Legacy training. When they finish all their traditional modules, they wanted to bring me in to do a module on LSD and the mind of the universe, a more radical kind of conceptualization of the process. But that's pretty much the extent of it, besides my personal familiarity with some of the instructors, meeting at conferences and things like that. Yeah. But I think we have enough time for me to bring in one more concept about
Please do.
How my understanding of reincarnation has changed, not just into understanding aggregate or collective reincarnation, but one other aspect. The traditional thinking about reincarnation is you grow, you mature. Sure, you make mistakes, but you get better and better mature. You open up your chakras, you activate the potentials which are built into this psychophysical system. And then eventually you have a spiritual awakening, and your consciousness opens to the core foundation of consciousness, and you discover that the essence of your being is actually the essence of all beings. And so that there is, from that perspective, only one fundamental consciousness in life. But the point is, once you make that discovery, once you achieve what the Hindus called moksha, the consequence of that is you no longer have to incarnate anymore. You escape samsara, moksha, you transcend. And in Buddhism, to achieve enlightenment, when an enlightened being leaves, they enter not simply nirvana, they enter parinirvana. And when the Buddha's students asked him, where does the Buddha go and what's his existence like? He refused to answer. He said you wouldn't be able to understand it. But the basic idea of all the religions of the axial age, with some exceptions for the great masters, but I think the general rule of thumb for the religions is to achieve some condition, whether it's salvation, enlightenment, oneness with God, so that when you die, the culmination of that spiritual development takes place off planet, either in Pure Land in Buddhism, or in the garden in Islam, or heaven, or so on and so forth. And I understand that. And I think that makes perfectly good sense given the context in which these religions were born. We began to make contact with that deep, deep level of consciousness, maybe ballpark about 5,000 years ago. We began to learn to quiet the mind, sink down, quiet the mind, sink down, and drop down into the divine consciousness where Atman is Brahman, the discovery that Atman is Brahman. And when we began to experience the infinite bliss of what I would think of as the mother universe, we're in the daughter universe, when you experience that bliss, and you experience the sense of homecoming, we come from that, we belong there, then naturally it develops a theology where the purpose of life is to get back there. And they develop theologies of trying to explain, how did we get stuck here when we started there? And so you have theories of a fall, or angelic fall, or an original sin, or something to explain how we got stranded here, and the goal is to get back to there. But and reincarnation plays the part in giving us enough time to make that return back. But that's not what happened in my sessions. And so out of my psychedelic work, I developed a different understanding of what the process is. There was one day in one particular session, I think it's 38 in the book, about halfway through my journey, after a first half of deep, deep cleansing, I got into a situation where my former lives started coming back into me. And I had cleared a bunch of them, but they were coming back into me. And it was like wrapping a filament of white light around a kite spool. And they were coming fast and furious, whole lifetimes coming in. And then it was as if they hit critical mass and they fused. And when they fused, that fusion created a single integrated consciousness out of all those lives. And when that happened, there was an explosion of diamond light out of my chest. And I was catapulted into a state of consciousness beyond any I had been in before. And in that state, I was an individual, but I was an individual beyond any frame of reference that I had any way of understanding up to that point in time. And then in that condition, I was given a lot of teachings that was basically explaining to me, this is not just happening to you. This is happening to every human being on the planet. This is where reincarnation is taking humanity. It's taking humanity not simply in incremental development stages by stage, incarnation by incarnation, getting better, getting more whole, more healed, more wise, and so on. But sooner or later, there comes a point in our evolutionary saga where we begin to actively integrate our past. We begin to bring them together, heal them, synthesize them, infuse them. And sooner or later, we reach an evolutionary threshold where all of those lives fuse into one. And this is what I call the diamond soul is born, the birth of the diamond soul. And the diamond soul is simply the soul, but most of us experience our soul when we're dead. The diamond soul is the awakening of the soul inside our physical incarnation, so that when that happens, we are never tempted to identify our mind, our soul as a 100-year being, but it's a 100,000-year being. And our understanding, our feeling of compassion is radically expanded because we have had lives with so many people. We've had shared lives with so many thousands of people. And we've been white, we've been black, we've been yellow, we've been every race, we've been every religion, we've been rich and poor, we've been everything. And it just, all of those fuse into a consciousness which integrates all of those beings. But the next step is not to leave Earth, but to bring that soul consciousness. It wakes up on Earth. And when that happens, we become a new kind of human being. We become a fully spiritual awake, not simply awake as an enlightenment kind of awake. That's a beautiful, wonderful spiritual awakeness, but empowered by the full knowledge of all of our former lives, orchestrated into a single consciousness. So when I had this experience, I began to understand that realizing transcendence, realizing the Mother Universe, returning to oneness with the divine, transcendental oneness, is not the end of the journey. It's one half of the journey. It's the first half of the journey of return. But the second half of the journey is to bring that consciousness back into our body, back into our earth, back into our politics, back into history. And this is not a personal thing. This is an entire species that is waking up to their true spiritual identity, empowered by the seizing of their memories, the active embrace of their memories. And then just imagine what that kind of species would be able to do. What couldn't we do if we were that species? And there's another chapter in the book called The Birth of the Future Human, where I gather together all the visions and experiences that were given to me over a period of time, which kept on showing me that humanity is coming into a turning point. We're coming into a radical pivot that's going to be a before and after moment in our long evolutionary story, a time of profound spiritual awakening, the birth of the future human, a shift so deep, it's not simply a shift in our civilizational structures, a shift in our cultures, a shift in our spiritual values, but it's literally a shift in the collective psyche itself. I think of it as a shift in the plate tectonics of the collective psyche, so that all children born after this historical event takes place will be born and live their life contextualized within a much more spiritually awakened, spiritually empowered consciousness. And when we try to think about, well, what will this future human be like? We don't need to go to science fiction, and we don't need to go into all sorts of fancy imagination about the dramatic qualities that this being might have. We simply have to look at our history. The divine, nature, has been gestating the future human for hundreds of thousands of years. Incarnation by incarnation by incarnation, we have been developing the capacities which will be manifest in the mature form of the future human. And I think the form of the future human is the diamond soul. The form of the future human is the fully awakened soul inside our incarnate existence. This is not simply, it will have a profound opening of the human heart, a radical rupturing of our smallness into the, I think, a vivid experience of the oneness of all life. It's also going to be an opening of our consciousness to the vertical dimension, so that we will be able to take in information much more freely from the divine creativity, from the divine consciousness of the cosmos into our life. So the paradox is, as long as we are fragmented as a species, all cut off in our separate little boxes, we are cut off from the great breadth of cosmic consciousness. But when we begin to integrate individually and as a species, that will produce not only a healing of the human heart, an expansion of the human heart, and a renovation of our social relationships, but it will trigger an opening of our collective, of our mind, of our ability to bring in information from the divine mind. And there's no technical problem that we won't be able to solve. All the limits that we are facing now, all the obstacles where we just don't know how to solve these problems, all of them will be able to be solved. And the key, of course, is that we heal and integrate the human family. And we do that, one of the ways we do that is by healing and integrating our soul, because our soul holds the entire human family inside of it. So just as the world, I think, is trying to become one, as we wrestle with global issues that cannot be solved on a national level, they have to be solved at a global level. Likewise, the soul is integrating all of these lives from all of these nations and all of these religions and all of these cultures into the oneness here. So I think there's a synergistic relationship between the pressures building in history to become one planet, one citizenship, and to become one soul. They reinforce each other. I think before a mystic can reach full divine realization, they must go through that long, dark purification that we call the dark night of the soul. And I think before the human species can come to this radical fruition, likewise, they must enter and endure the dark night of our collective soul. That means we literally are embodying the toxins of our past. We are bringing forward the poisons of all our more ignorant states of mind, states of emotions, the divisive ways, habits of mind, habits of heart. These are all coming up inside of us, and we have to choose a more inclusive way. We have to choose the way of peace. We choose the way of harmony, to choose inclusion again and again and again, so that we can let these toxins fade, let them go, and therefore open ourselves to the infusion of grace that's becoming available to us now, that's going to be opening to us. I thought this was all going to be taking place, honestly, when I had these experiences, I thought they would be taking place after I died. But now when I'm looking at things taking place around me, it seems like clearly it's beginning. It has begun. We have begun this collective purification process. And not to mention any presidential candidates in particular, but clearly there is one particular person in Washington who is accelerating this detoxification by welcoming all these toxins out of our collective psyche. And I think in that way, I hope hastening our turning our back on these ways of the past and eventually choosing a better way forward in the future.
Yeah. Well said. Very well said. I share similar experiences and visions that you talk about. Mm-hmm. So I resonate with it so very much. And I was talking with someone yesterday about the collective chaos that we're experiencing now, and how important it is to discern choices that are aligned with our soul. So that's exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. Thank you.
There's nothing. I'm just one of many people. Many psychedelic people are seeing this. Many people who work in meditation, who work with hypnotic regression, are seeing this. The indigenous cultures have been seeing this. This is nothing new. It's just coming up again in yet one more context. It's coming up underneath our feet. It's not being led from above down. It's just bubbling up inside us in every way possible. Yeah.
Yes. And again, having this group that we can talk so openly about these things is just absolutely wonderful. We're not going to get burned at the stake, or, as not too many years ago they were. So
I think we've probably all paid those dues.
Yeah, we've probably been there, done that, right?
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you one more question, because you emphasize that we need to ask the Oversoul, the cosmos, the universe, really clear questions. So in this moment, what question would you want to ask the universe?
The question I ask the universe regularly is, how can I serve the awakening of the human family? Just given the limitations of my being, what I have available, how can I serve the awakening of the human family? How can I serve the healing of the human family? How can I serve the infusion of grace into the human family? And I think it's, for example, I think it's really important that we have an understanding of the future human. If we don't have an understanding that nature is building something new, is giving birth to something new, then when the darkness gathers, when the hard times come, we could give up hope. We could be defeated, and we could think we're being punished, or we could think that there's no meaning to this. It's just life is cruel. And that's why I think it's really important for us to understand that our great spiritual leaders and teachers are showing us our own future. They're giving us glimpses of what the divine is bringing forward on this planet. And we have to hold on to that vision and hold on to it as the dark clouds gather. So that's my question. How can I help? In what way can I help?
Oh, that's beautiful. Many people in this group share that same vision for their personal journey. So it's wonderful for us all to share it in this conversation tonight. So thank you for sharing yours with us. And, collectively, we put that question out to the universe, and I know your life has expanded exponentially since you wrote Lifecycles. I know mine has in just, 10 years. I never would have dreamt that I would be where I am now. So I feel like by just our collectively putting those questions out to the universe, it creates that channel, that funnel, like you were talking about, from the divine to show us exactly what we can do to help.
Yeah.
So,
I sometimes say, I think that the real question is not, what can I do? Much more important question is, do I have the courage to do what I see I can do? That's the hard question.
Just gave me goosebumps. Yeah. Yes. And you obviously have stepped up to the plate and said, yes, I can. And we so appreciate you for that. I want to end with one more thought, and that was in the end of your book, you said, we will one day complete our mission and return to the whole. We yield not because we have failed, but because we have succeeded. This is not death, but the rhythm of eternal life. I get emotional just even saying the words. So thank you for planting those seeds in our minds and our hearts. And
when I wrote LSD in the Mind of the Universe, I had a deep sense of having completed my life's work. But now there's another stage which is beginning to open, and it's kind of like writing the book was the written tradition, but now I'm following the book out into the world, and I'm going where it's leading me, and it's leading me into conversations like this. And so there is an oral tradition that's emerging where the written words are enlivened by sharing each other's experience in a living conversation. And I'm beginning to think that maybe out of this vital conversation, which for me is focused so strongly on seizing the cosmological and the philosophical implications of psychedelics. There are other people who are working on the therapeutic, harnessing their therapeutic power, and other people who are working on harnessing their spiritual awakening power. But as a philosopher, I've been focused on harnessing their philosophical and cosmological power. And so that's the kind of conversations that I want to encourage. And I'm beginning to think that there may be a book coming out of those dialogues, but we'll have to wait and see. I've been promised that it'll be an easier book to write than the last one. The last one took me 5 years to write. So
Yeah.
we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, and all the research you put in before those 5 years.
Yeah,
So
it was a 40-year project.
yeah. What due diligence that you've had in doing that. Thank you so very, very much. And we will look forward to that next book and welcome you back to talk about it.